So I'm not supposed to do this, but I am releasing for free week 1 module, how to find a principal investigator, from our Site Owner Academy, just to give you a little taste. All right, now we're going to have 12 of these modules, and in the actual academy we're going to have webinars, which are live Q&A sessions with myself and Chris, for anyone who wants to get some of this information but make it applicable for their situation. That's what the webinars are for. Not only that, we give you homework, like practical homework, so that by the time you're done with the academy, you'll at least have a PI and some study leads. So enjoy. And this is week 1. I will not be releasing any other ones. I might be releasing some on the podcast, but not on video. All right, Site Owner Academy. Enjoy. So week 1 is all about finding a PI. How do we get a PI for your new research clinic? And by the way, these same principles are going to apply for how you're going to get a PI in year 5 of your research clinic's existence. So it's not just how to find your first PI, but it's how to find all of your physicians, all of your future PIs, and or sub-Is. And we're going to get into how these strategies work. And obviously everyone's going to have different preferences, and in your market something may work better than in another market. You're going to figure those things out, but here I lay it all out for you. Exactly what to do, how you should do it, how frequently, what the objections are going to be, and you need to constantly be doing this, because as a research site owner, you should never be too dependent on one PI, okay? You only need one to get started, but you should constantly be increasing your physician network for your research company, or even starting new companies with new PIs, depending on the strategy. And we're certainly going to get into those in future weekly modules. But for now, let's just start with the basics, finding your first PI. But again, just know that these strategies are also going to work for finding PI number 2, 3, and so on and so forth throughout the course of your research clinic. So, preferably, your PI should be a medical doctor or a doctor of osteopathy, licensed to practice in the state that you intend to operate your research clinic. Another thing we should add here is they live nearby your clinic. So, I know a lot of sites that have a PI that is licensed in multiple states, and that's great, that's allowed. However, one of the states where they're licensed in, they rarely ever go to that state. So they go there when they're on vacation, or at one point they had a license there, but they've since moved, yet they still maintain their license. That will not work for you. And the reason that won't work for you is because of PI oversight, which is what we're going to get into later on in this module, and certainly in other modules for this Site Owner Academy. But they need to live in your city that your site is going to be located in. Okay, they need to be licensed in that state. They need to be in good standing with the medical board for your state, and you can look that up on Google. As a matter of fact, there are resources at the end of this module for you to look that up, but you can just Google your state medical board and find out if there's been any legal or any black marks on the physician's name. So as long as all that is good, okay, an MD, a DO, license in your state, in good standing, no, not on the blacklist on your state, not in suspension, no probations, right? Because all those things are gonna make it harder for you to find studies. I know some sites that have physicians that have had issues decades ago, and sponsors still have issues and objections to those sites utilizing those doctors as their PI. So do your due diligence beforehand. Look them up on the state board in your state. Okay, look them up on the FDA website. There's a website that will show you if there's any blackballed physicians uh, that is under the jurisdiction of the FDA, where the FDA does not allow or has blacklisted, I guess that's the better term, blacklisted these physicians from participating in clinical research. So 90% of the time you're not going to deal with that. But as you'll see, some of these strategies, you're just going to basically be reaching out to strangers online, and you got to do at least some due diligence beforehand to make sure that you're not wasting your time. Okay? So, board certification is not required, although it certainly is preferred. But it's not required, okay? Your first PI should preferably be a general practitioner, family practice medicine, general internist, internal medicine, whatever you call it. It's basically the first line of defense in HMO plans. They're the gatekeepers. They're the ones who have to see the patients first before they refer to a specialist. So, general practitioners, okay? You don't need specialists. Eventually, you're going to want to maybe recruit specialists to join your group if you ever get specialty studies, or if you have a particular study where you need help with recruiting patients or you need help with certain assessments. These strategies are going to help you find specialists as well. But when you first start out, you want to have a general practitioner, and the reason for that is 80% of clinical trials on clinicaltrials.gov, which we're going to get into how to find studies in future modules. Right now, you need to find a doctor first, or else there's no sense in learning how to find studies. But your PI, 80% of the studies on clinicaltrials.gov are general medicine studies, okay? And even the specialty type of studies, like let's take for example Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's is a hot topic right now, or OBGYN, because that's also a hot market right now in the world of clinical research. Your general practitioner, your neighborhood general practitioner, sees patients with Alzheimer's, sees patients with OBGYN issues. They treat them first and then they refer to specialists. So, why is that important in research? Well, sponsors need patients for their studies. 90% of studies are delayed in enrollment because sites, research clinics, clinical trial sites, they're synonymous, they have trouble recruiting patients. And so if you have a general practitioner who sees these kind of patients, the sponsor is much more likely to give you that study even if your PI is not that experienced, okay? And we're going to talk about experience in future modules for how to biz dev once you have a PI. Okay, so general practitioner is best. If you happen to find a specialist first, that's fine. Let's start with someone, but if you can have a choice, make it a general practitioner. If you happen to have a specialist, work with them, but also continue to search for a general practitioner as well. So your first PI may or may not have their own office space, and then with enough space to conduct clinical research. We're going to get into why I believe you should find, at least for your first PI, one that has his or her own office with a private practice, with patients that they can enroll in your studies, and with enough space in their clinic, which we're going to get into in later video modules later on in the coming weeks here. Enough space to conduct clinical research. So let's get into some of these different setups, okay? There's only two different ways to go about it, using your own office or using the physician's office. So let's talk about using your own office first, okay? What are the pros and cons? So the pros, let's go through those first. Of using your own office. So you control the layout, okay? No one else is occupying the office space. It's all you. You're certainly going to have plenty of space. You control the layout, so you can tell the landlord how you want it set up. You want these rooms set up this way. We're going to get into that again in future modules. You have more space potentially. All you need to do to get started is to have at least 1,500 square feet. Okay, and it's less chaotic. All right. There's no physician staff running around. There's no secretaries, receptionists, medical assistants running around and messing with your paperwork, okay? It's all you. You bring the people in, and then you control them. What are the cons? High upfront costs. So I like to mitigate my risk whenever possible, and so I don't like to pay rent when I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get studies, right? Especially if I've never done clinical research before. I don't want upfront costs. Worse than that, I don't want to be a personal guarantor on a long-term lease. Some of these commercial leases require a 2, 3, 4, 5 year commitment with a personal guarantor. So you're pretty much on the hook for that rent for a long period of time, and you don't even know if you're able to get studies or make money. Okay? I don't like that. So that's definitely a big con. And you shouldn't like that either. Another con, the doctor will have to come to your site. So this is going to play a role in their ability to have effective oversight and effective safety of the patient's well-being and effective oversight over the conduct of the study. And yes, you'll be doing most of the work, but when the monitors come to visit your site, which are auditors, which we're going to learn about in future modules, if you don't know what that is, don't worry. Just know that the sponsor sends out auditors to your research clinic when you have a study that they're sponsoring, and they're going to want to meet with the PI, and they're going to want to see and they're going to be able to know, because these are experienced people. They're going to be able to know whether your PI is actually there or not and maintaining proper oversight. And if they're not maintaining proper oversight, that's the end for that PI, because the sponsor, they will not tolerate PIs with no oversight. The FDA will crack down on those sponsors for not enforcing the sites to maintain adequate oversight over their studies with the PIs. Okay. Another con for using your own office is the sponsors will question how you are able to recruit patients if there's no private practice nearby. So they're going to say, yeah, you have a physician. Obviously, you have a PI, or else we wouldn't be talking to you. But how are you going to recruit patients? Like, if your physician's on the other side of town, first of all, how do we know that he or she is going to refer you patients? Second of all, even if they are willing to refer patients and they do refer patients, logistics wise, how are you going to get the patients from there here? It doesn't work as well as having the PI's private practice on site, which brings us to the next slide and the next option, using the physician's office, using the PI's office. So obviously, you can tell I'm a fan of this strategy. I highly recommend it. I think it is going to be increasingly more important in the future as studies get more complex. You absolutely have to have a physician private practice within the research clinic. Okay, I know many sites that have gotten really big, and they're standalone sites and they have all the physicians come to them, but those were sites that started 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even longer, and have built up their own database. And now that trials are getting more complex, they're actually able to have physicians refer patients to them. They're able to do that. You're going to have a much harder time doing that. So I recommend you start with using the PI's office first. So the pros, less upfront costs. Okay. Yes, the PI may want to charge you a percentage of the rent or not. Again, it's all negotiable, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. Uh, yes, they may have you pitch in for utilities or for staff or for equipment that you're using or not. Again, there's no rules. It's between you and the PI. But most importantly, no need to personally guarantee a lease. Okay, so the PI and yourself, the PI is most likely the one that's on the hook for the lease. Okay, not you. So if your research clinic doesn't work out, you at least don't have a long-term lease to worry about. Okay, that's someone else's problem, not yours. Another pro of using the PI's office, access to patients from the private practice. So the PI has a private practice. Hopefully it's busy. Hopefully it has a huge database, and that means more potential patients for your studies, which the sponsors like and which you should like, because research clinics don't get paid. There's no revenue unless you enroll subjects. This is not academic research where we get grants and we get paid regardless of whether we enroll patients or not. This is industry sponsored research, and we only get paid based on activity, based on not even just screening, which we're going to get into later in other modules, but once patients randomize, means once patients are past the screening phase and are now ready to be enrolled in the study and actually start taking the study drug, the placebo, or the comparator medication. Okay. Another pro of using the PI's office is the PI is on site more often. So there's no issues, or there's less issues. There's going to be less issues with PI oversight, because if the PI is on site, chances are he or she can easily be reached if a sponsor needs to talk to them, if a coordinator needs a signature, if a patient's having an adverse event. The PI's there. The PI's on site. Okay? And you're potentially able to utilize their existing equipment and their staff. And again, that may be free. Okay? That may be you have to pay a small fee. That maybe you have to pay them a greater percentage of the overall revenue, which we're going to get into as well, but it's all negotiable. Okay. The cons of using the PI's office, there's not too many, but one is potentially less space. So especially the busier the private practice is, these private practices are not built for research. So you need, as you're going to see in future weekly modules, room for drug storage, which is not adequate. Current PIs, private practices, are not adequately equipped to store drug. Yes, they store a lot of samples, but that is not investigational product, and the standards are much stricter in research, much stricter. You need temperature controlled, you need logs, you need restricted access or limited access. So chances are that you're competing with space that they're using for their private practice, and they're not going to be so happy to give that up because they're actually making money in their private practice. They're not making money with you yet. Okay, so once you make money with them, then it's a little easier to convince them to sacrifice some of their current space that they're using for their practice for your research. But for now, you're going to be working with less space, potentially. Okay, not always. Sometimes they have adequate space, but usually you're going to be working with less space because you just need a lot more space for clinical research, as you're going to see in future modules. Another con of using the PI's office: you're not in control of the layout of the facility. Okay, eventually you might be, but again, once the PI starts seeing that you're generating revenue for them, then they're willing to change their layout and to complicate their own private practice. But for now, you're at the mercy of their current layout and you have to work with it. And you're going to get into that in future weekly modules. We're going to show you exactly what the layout needs to be like. Also, staff compliance, okay? If they have medical assistants running around and stumbling through your lab kits and through your papers, which they shouldn't, but sometimes they do because they're looking for something, and after all, it is their office. They might mess around with your papers and lose them, and that's certainly not a good thing. So you're not in charge of these staff members unless the PI delegates that you do have some oversight over their staff. Okay, but more often than not, you're not, and you're at the mercy of the staff respecting your space, which is usually not a problem, but sometimes it is. And generally, just a more chaotic environment. Okay, so again, you're not controlling the space, so patients could be walking through, staff could be bringing their family or friends into the office, and again, if it's your own space, you can set up your own policy, but if the physician has policies that they don't enforce, it's not really your role to enforce those policies. So unfortunately, you're at the mercy of their current policies and how well they enforce it. So just a few cons, but in my opinion, the pros far outweigh the cons. Okay, the cons you could work with. The cons in the other option of using your own space are a little riskier, actually a lot riskier. All right, so here's how to find PIs. All right, start with your sphere of influence. You know someone, or you yourself have your own physician. Okay, start with them. I ask my doctors all the time. Remember, I said always be recruiting physicians? Each time I go to my doctor, I ask them, hey, are you interested in research? Do you know any colleagues that have mentioned that they're potentially interested in clinical research? Let me know. I've been able to network with many physicians just by using my own sphere of influence. I don't even stop at my doctor's. I go to my dentist. When I go there, I ask them if they want to do dental studies or if they know any physicians that want to do clinical research. Everywhere you go, ask if they know some physician who's interested in doing clinical research or is at least interested in learning more about how to bring on additional revenue to their established private practice. Okay, so this is where your salesmanship is going to have to come in as well. So start with your sphere of influence, okay? Your physician, their colleagues, your friends' physicians, their colleagues, etc. Okay? Now, that will only take you so far. You can also advertise. Indeed.com. It's free. They have a paid version as well. I think it's like $50 a month. But the free one works just as well. Go on Indeed.com, post a job wanted ad, how to find a PI. We have examples of these which we are going to upload in the Intralinks workspace. Examples of PI ads. Same thing with Craigslist. Craigslist, you can pay for an ad for physicians. I used to be a skeptic. I used to think that Craigslist is only for scams, and it's not the case. We ran many ads on Craigslist. Yes, you have to filter through a lot of bad candidates. You're going to get on Craigslist, you're going to get a lot of physicians with revoked licenses or suspended licenses or foreign trained physicians that are not licensed to practice in the United States reach out to you despite how well you word your ad, which again we're going to post in Intralinks. You're going to get that and you're going to have to filter it out. But you can get good physicians there and you can at least help you find more people to talk to and practice your sales pitch when it comes to talking about clinical research to physicians. So you're going to start with obviously a phone call because they usually give you their email and then you can reply to their email and then set up a teleconference. And I have a video on the last slide of this module with a link to a video where I actually talked to a physician live uh, who responded to one of my Craigslist ads. And so you can see some of the objections. And we're going to get into some of the objections in this module as well. So Craigslist is good too. LinkedIn as well. Facebook as well. You can make them highly targeted, so just in a certain zip code and just people that are physicians. So MDs or DOs. Okay? Another way is to identify them. So, okay, your sphere of influence is great. Advertising is great, but you don't have an unlimited advertising budget. So how do you identify them for free? Identify more physicians in your area for free. I like two particular ways, but a third one is Google, which I didn't think, I mean, that seems obvious, so I didn't want to put that in here. But you can always Google physicians in your zip code and go talk to them, call them, show up to their office. I like open payments, data.cms.gov. We have the um, link here for you, openpaymentsdata.cms.gov. So you can search by zip code and then you can find their address and you can send them a mailer or you can go physically go door knock their private practice, show up with some cookies to get past the gatekeepers, or perhaps schedule a lunch with them. Okay, so the door knocking, I know people don't like it. They'd rather send mailers, they'd rather do a teleconference, they'd rather send an email, they'd rather post an ad. All that's great, but there's no way around door knocking. Okay, if you need a physician, you've got to start door knocking the physicians' offices and get them to at least talk to you about research so that you can practice your sales pitch with them. So door knocking is important, and one of the ways, in fact, I'll spend a little bit of time on this. One of the ways to do that is to there's two ways, okay? There's a way that you can call and try to schedule a 5-minute lunch with the doctor, which most of the time you're going to get rejected, okay? Um, Oftentimes, the receptionist will think that you're a sales rep for a drug company, and they're going to expect that you bring lunch. And then when you do meet with the physician, they're going to realize that you're not a drug rep, and maybe they'll be interested, maybe they won't. I don't really like to do that. I just like to go door knock. I don't mind rejection. So, and you shouldn't either. You should get used to rejection. 90% of the doctors you're going to talk to are going to reject you, and that's okay, all right? Because it's those 10% that are going to end up potentially working with you that make it worth it. So, get used to it. I'm actually going to have this as a homework assignment for the students in the academy to door knock at least once a month. Okay, and it's a 3-month course, so 3 times throughout the course you're gonna go door knock, and at least for an hour, and see how many contacts you made. Okay, and now when you door knock, you want to bring some flyers and brochures with you, and this is why you want to have a website. So even though you don't have a PI yet, if you're serious about having a research clinic, you should have a website. If you need help with creating the website, I have a digital agency that can do this. I charge $800 to do that, so let me know. But you want to have a brochure with a link to your website, with your phone number, with your email address, just so that you seem more credible. Okay, and then hopefully you get the chance to schedule an actual lunch where you can bring in sandwiches for the doctor and their staff. Or maybe they'll let you present right on the spot. You never know. More often than not, they're going to have you come in on another date and present the opportunity. And this is how you present the opportunity. You have a flyer or brochure. Okay, you should make one. If you need a sample content for the flyer brochure, we will have one posted in Intralinks for the students of the Site Owner Academy. So know their objections and handle their objections, okay? PIs, physicians, I shouldn't say PIs because they're not PIs yet, they think they know everything, but they don't, okay? So they think that they know what research is, but they don't. Either they think that they can never do research because they think of it as something only academics do, which is couldn't be further from the truth, or they've heard of other physicians that have done clinical research and they've had bad experiences, and so they want nothing to do with the research because they've heard so many bad experiences from other physicians. And this is true. Actually, an alarming stat is that 80%, I think, it might even be as high as 90, but let's just say 80% of first-time principal investigators never, never end up doing another study again. And that's an alarming stat because it shows that these physicians, they didn't have the right infrastructure in place. They didn't have you who are taking the Site Owner Academy, who are learning how to set up the proper foundation for a successful clinical research site. They didn't have that. They just had a front desk person that they said is their study coordinator, and then they realized that it's a lot more work than their front desk person was A, prepared to undertake, and B, qualified to undertake. And so, of course, the study ends up being a disaster. The physician doesn't want anything else to do with research ever again, and he or she tells all of their colleagues whenever they get an opportunity, run away from research. So that's an objection you're going to get, okay? Is I've heard from my friend that it's just a nightmare and I don't want to deal with that. That's one objection. Another one is the FDA. Okay, they're scared about the FDA. It is a highly regulated industry, and they're afraid that they're going to get audited, and they're afraid that their license is going to be revoked or suspended, or that they're going to get fines, or that they're going to get sued by somebody. And yes, the FDA can audit you. So let's talk about that one first. The FDA can audit sites. Now, and by sites I mean principal investigators. Okay, site and clinical research facility and principal investigator facility are all synonymous. Okay, so yes, the FDA does audit for cause sometimes or randomly. Okay, in my 12 years of personally running 3 research clinics and overseeing a dozen others, I have yet to have an FDA audit. Now, we have small sites. Okay, our biggest site does maybe 10 studies a year at their peak. Okay, so we're not doing like 20, 30, 40 studies a year, and then your chances of getting audited go up. But the FDA, I've interviewed many FDA auditors before, they really have no teeth. The worst thing they can do, even if they find terrible findings, okay? Anything outside of fraud, because once you get into fraud and just fabricating patients, then I think the Department of Justice gets involved and you may have serious fines, penalties, maybe even jail time. But the FDA, okay, if you're just not maintaining oversight of your research clinic, you being the physician in this case, the worst they can do is blacklist you from doing research. Another thing they can do is issue a 483, which is a warning letter, which will highlight the findings that occurred. And sponsors always ask, was the investigator or the site ever issued any 483s? So those are not good. But their worst case doomsday scenario situation is just not a reality. That's not going to happen, okay? No one loses their license. Again, if you commit fraud, that's a different category. But if you're just running a research study and you don't know what you're doing and you're not maintaining adequate oversight, you're not going to lose your license, okay? You may never be allowed to do research again, but you're not going to lose your license. So that's number one. Number two, this is where you need to tell the physician that you are the one that is going to be running the operations. You've taken training on this. You understand what's going on. You can hire us as consultants when you're done. Myself and Chris through DSCS. It's a CRO and a consulting company where we help sites manage their business development as well as their site operations. We can get into that later. You have people, you have staff, you have training, you understand the business, you understand the industry, you understand how to run an operation, and you are not going to let those things happen. That's why they need to partner with you or work with you on this. Okay, they should not do it by themselves, and chances are their colleagues did it by themselves, thinking that it would be easy, and it turns out it wasn't, and that's because they're missing trained staff who know what they're doing and who have built a foundation. Okay, so that's one objection. That's actually two: the FDA and the license and the fines. Another objection is, yeah, but my medical malpractice insurance is going to go up. It's going to skyrocket, and in some cases it might. Okay, and an objection for that would be, if it does, I will pay the difference. Okay? So sometimes, typically they're between 7 to 15,000 a year for medical malpractice. The physician, if they have a private practice of their own, they have to pay that anyways. Okay? So chances are their medical malpractice will cover research. You just need to make sure that you call them, the insurance provider, and you ask them about, do they cover clinical research activities? Many times, we've done it ourselves. Chris and myself, we've actually made these calls. Many times, they actually cover it at no additional cost. It's already part of the policy. Sometimes it goes up a little, like a couple $100 a year. Sometimes it goes up a lot, like an extra couple $1,000 a year. So, to ease their concerns, you explain that sometimes it doesn't go up at all, other times it goes up a little, and other times it goes up a lot, and within reason, I will pay the difference. Okay? Because it's going to make sense, and you can deduct it from their payments later, which is going to be on the next slide. But let's get through some more of these objections. Okay? So, paperwork, another objection they're going to have. Another objection they're going to have is, I'm going to be drowning in paperwork. I don't have time for this, which is another objection. But let's stick to the paperwork one. No, let's combine the paperwork and the time commitment objection together because they're related. Okay? So, I don't have time for this. I'm going to be drowning in paperwork. I don't want my receptionist to uh, stop doing their job of authorizing refills or managing appointments and schedulings and all that other stuff. They're already busy enough as it is. I don't want them, and they can't take on any more work, and I certainly can't either. Okay. And I understand in research there's a lot of paperwork. That's the objection. Your job now is to explain to them that there's a position which every research clinic needs to have, and that's a study coordinator. Okay? And hopefully you're the study coordinator, but if not, you're going to find one and pay them, and we're going to talk to you about how to do that later in future modules. So, first of all, there's a study coordinator. They're the backbone of every study. Yes, the PI is the one responsible for the conduct of the study, but the study coordinator is the backbone of any clinical trial. They are worth their weight in gold, and they're the ones that handle all the paperwork. They streamline everything for you, so all you've got to do is maintain oversight, which means make sure that the patients are safe, which means looking at their lab results as they come in, looking at their ECG results as they come in, looking at progress notes from the coordinator, looking at adverse events that they might be having during their study visits, which may be every week, which may be once a month, which may be once every 3 months, depending on the study. So the study coordinator is going to do all the paperwork. Anything that you need to sign is going to be ready, prepared for you to sign. Time commitments are going to be meeting with the monitors when they come, and however long it's going to take you to maintain adequate oversight of your patients, which the study coordinator is going to do 90% of. They're going to do everything that they can outside of being a clinician because that's your job. So, early on, you're not going to spend more than 1 to 5 hours a week on research. And probably closer to 1. Okay? Because before you even get a study, or until you even get a study, you're going to be spending 0 hours a week on research, except for the site selection visit when they come visit your site, and then they're going to want 30 minutes with you. So, time commitment is going to increase as you start seeing more patients in the studies, but so is your payments, so is your revenue. And that's the next one, payments. So, okay, this is good. So, how are we going to get paid? What are we going to do? Right? So, that's the next slide. Next slide. How to pay your physician. So there's different ways of doing it, okay? Hourly, fee for service or fee for assessment, percentage, okay? Partnership, or a combination. And you can get creative. There are no rules. Remember, there are no rules other than anti-kickback rule. But consult with an attorney. I have a really good one. I've interviewed him many times. Darshan Kulkarni. He focuses on clinical research and pharma. Okay, so hourly. Hourly is the PI will be either an independent contractor of yours or on your payroll as an employee. Okay, and you pay them for the hours that they spend doing research. Okay, typically anywhere from $200 to $350 an hour for a typical physician anywhere in the country, right? Again, W-2, which I don't recommend, or 1099, which is an independent contractor, which I do recommend. I'm not going to get into why I recommend one or the other. Consult with a tax attorney for that. But again, it's a lot less risk for you as the business owner to have an independent contractor. You may be paying more, but it's a lot less risky for you to have an independent contractor as opposed to an employee. Okay, let's just leave it at that. So, hourly. Fee for service, same setup. Typically, that will be only an independent contractor, which is good. That's what you want, anyways. So, fee for service, you pay them to do a physical exam. You pay them to review a lab result. You pay them to do an assessment that only a physician can do. Okay, and you try to keep those things as as infrequent as possible, as the protocol allows, and you show them the budget. Here, Doctor So and So. As you can see, Pfizer's paying me $200 for a physical, so I'm gonna pay you all of it. You get $200 for the physical. Okay, um, that's fee for service. Now, typically, they're not gonna like that, especially early on. Um, and especially if you're using their office because they're giving up all the space, it's opportunity cost, and they're just not making enough. And you're not going to have enough patients uh, because you're only going to have one study maybe by that point, and you're not going to be enrolling that many patients because when you're new, you want to start off slow, right, to keep errors down. So my favorite is percentage. And again, you're going to have them as an independent contractor. You're going to pay them as an independent contractor, okay, a 1099. They're going to get a 1099 at the end of the year. And under this model, you're going to pay them a percentage of the gross income that you receive for every study that they're the PI for. So, for example, if 1 month you receive a check from Pfizer for $10,000 for activity collected, and you're going to learn much more about budgets in another module, not this week, but I'm just going to get into it a little. If you receive a check for $10,000 gross in 1 month from Pfizer for your study activities up until that point, you're going to pay the PI a percentage of that $10,000. A fair percentage is 20%. Okay, 20%. Now that number can go up or down from there depending on a couple of things. Okay, are you using their clinic or yours? Okay, if you're using yours, 20% should be the max because you already have plenty of expenses going out. You have a lot of risk on your end. The PI doesn't, and so you pay them 20% because that's fair. You can even pay them less than that, okay? Nothing less than 10. The lowest I've ever gone is 8%, and I can't actually remember what happened there, but they were okay with it. Uh, Mostly because they didn't know any better, but usually I go 20% when I'm having it at my clinic and the PI is coming to me. Okay? If I'm using their clinic and they're not charging me anything for the rent, okay? They're not even charging me a rent, and they're letting me use all their equipment, and they're even letting me use their staff occasionally, like medical assistants to draw blood and things like that, and they're not charging me, I would go as high as 50% of the gross budget. So that $10,000 check you got, pay them half of it. Okay, don't be greedy because they're taking care, they're absorbing all the costs, they're absorbing all the upfront risks. Okay, now most of the time that's not the setup. Most of the time they let you use their clinic, but they're charging you a small rent. It's less than market value because you negotiated it that way. And they're letting you use their equipment. They're probably not charging you for that. And they're letting you use your staff occasionally, but if it starts getting to be something that's consistent, you might need to start paying your staff extra out of your pocket. So in those cases, anywhere from 25 to 40% would be fair. I would try to keep it around 30. Okay, so that's just ballpark estimates. Again, once you find your physician, every situation's unique. Every situation needs its own analysis. As a graduate of the Site Owner Academy, I'm going to be here to help you out for your particular situation. But it's good for you to understand these things, okay? Because these are conversations that are going to come up. So another conversation is going to come up, and we're going to learn, again, we're going to get into all of this in other modules, particularly contracts and budgets, which Chris Sauber is going to handle, and he'll handle very nicely for you. But the conversation will come up as to what a typical study pays. And again, every study is so different. They range from very low budgets to huge seven-figure budgets, okay? The average study with the average number of enrollment, meaning you're not enrolling an unusually high number of patients at your site, and you're not enrolling an unusually low number of patients at your site, but you're keeping up, you're on par with the other sites. Okay, for the average study, you're going to gross $100,000 per year for that study. So back of the napkin math, let's say you negotiated 20% with the PI for that study, they're going to get $20,000 over that year for that study. Now, if you get 3 to 5 studies, you can see how that adds up. Like pretty soon they can start making 6 figures very passively, actually. Okay, and so that's your selling point. Is look, I'm bringing in extra revenue for you with very little extra work on your behalf because I have a good coordinator, or I am a good coordinator. I have a system in place where we're going to make this happen, and you're going to earn extra money, and you get the added prestige of being involved in clinical research, okay, and you get the added prestige of possibly becoming a key opinion leader with these pharma companies. That's another thing that we should have mentioned here when you're presenting the opportunity. Okay, maybe that's something you can put in your flyer or your brochure, but you can become a key opinion leader. Okay, and a lot of these doctors who prescribe a lot for a certain drug company, the medical liaison from that drug company will reach out to them and have them be a speaker for them. Well, if you're involved in research, you have a much greater chance of becoming a speaker because you understand the full end-to-end spectrum of R&D and of prescribing in your private practice. So that's another good thing to tell the physician is, hey, not only am I helping you earn more money every year, but I'm helping you become a key opinion leader in your space. We're going to establish relationships with these pharma companies and with some of these biotech companies that grow and get acquired, and now you're a key opinion leader for those bigger groups. Okay. The next way to compensate or pay your physician is by partnering with them. So it depends again on whether you're using their clinic or yours. But a partnership is different than a percentage because under a percentage agreement, remember, they're still an independent contractor. Okay? In a partnership, they are a business partner. So you set up an LLC or a S corp and you guys decide how much percentage equity you each have in the business. And there's no getting a percentage of gross payments in this case. You get percentage of the net income. Okay. A fair partnership equity split would be 50-50 or better for you, the site owner. Never give the PI more percentage, more equity in the company than you get. Okay. 50-50 is max. And that's because I'm looking out for your best interests. Okay. Now the PIs may offer you 80-20 favoring them, and you tell them, that's just way too much work. I don't think you understand the amount of work that goes into this. Okay. As some of your colleagues may know, they have attempted to do research. 90% of physicians who do research their first clinical trial never do a second. That's because there's a lot of work involved, and 50-50 for me is the minimum. Okay, but ideally you want to do like 60-40, 70-30, or even 80-20 you. But now don't get too greedy on the other end, because if they're going to be a business partner, you don't want resentment, and you want to continue to have them be incentivized to grow the business. Okay, so 50-50 is, I think, fair if you're using their clinic. If you're using yours, slightly more for you. But the more expenses that they're absorbing, the more equity I'd be comfortable giving them. Okay. And then you can always do a combination, right? Like, I'm going to pay you hourly, but I'm also going to pay you extra for these assessments. Or I'm going to pay you hourly or a fee for service, but I'm going to give you a percentage, like 5% or 8% of the gross payments that we receive, just for maintaining oversight. Okay. Or we're gonna partner. You're gonna be my business partner, but for certain assessments, because they take up some of your time, you're gonna get paid hourly or a fee for service. Again, be reasonable, get creative. Just make sure you're both happy. Make sure the win-win. It sounds so cliche, but it's true, because resentment is not good. Okay, and you can always change. Like, if these things don't work out, you can always tweak with the formula. The hardest thing to tweak and to get out of is just like a marriage is a business partnership, okay? Very easy to get into, difficult to get out of. But even then you can tweak, like you can cut hours, you can cut fees, you can increase percentages, you can increase hourly rates. Um, Partnership, you can't get out of it. You can buy them out or you can dissolve the company. So just, but there is combinations and you can always experiment. Okay, so now presenting the first study. So before, let's say you get a PI to agree to all this, okay, the first thing you want to do is get their CV, all right? So get their curriculum vitae, get it in a Word format, and you're going to tell them the reason is I have to put our company name or my company name on the top and my address on the top, okay, meaning the site address. So, and then I have to start for the studies we get, I have to start adding your experience to your CV. So I'm going to maintain your CV for you. So as we get studies, I can add studies to your CV, and pretty soon you're going to have a lot of studies on there. Okay. So obtain their CV in a Word document. Include your research site clinic business name on the top and the address, and then start biz deving, meaning start getting studies, which is a whole another module that we're not going to get into right now. All right. CDA. So this is a confidentiality disclosure agreement. When you reach out to a sponsor or a CRO for a study, the first thing they're going to do right after they ask to see your PI CV, which is why you should have it first, is they're going to send you a CDA, a confidentiality disclosure agreement. You've got to sign it. Sometimes your PI has to sign it and send it back to the sponsor. That is a document which states that you shall not share any information about the protocol because you're about to receive confidential information with anyone else. Okay, so when your PI asks what that is, say this is just so that they can start communicating with us about our potential involvement in a study. The next thing they're going to give us is a protocol synopsis. Right? It's a shortened version of the protocol. Protocols are usually 150 pages, more or less. A protocol synopsis is anywhere from 12 to 25 pages, and it's like a Cliff Notes version of the protocol. So the sponsors give you these so you and the PI can make the determination of whether you think you want to participate in this, whether you think you can enroll a decent amount of patients, what your screen failure rate is anticipated to be, and what your enrollment rate is anticipated to be. And these things are what they're going to be asking you when they give you the next document. Usually they give it to you concurrently with the synopsis is a feasibility survey. So they're going to give you the feasibility survey, and you have to fill it out, and then you have to send it back. And if they like your responses, they're going to schedule a site selection visit for you, which we will get into in other modules. Now, Chris and I, in our business development company, the SCS, which I mentioned earlier, we do all this for you, other than having your PI sign the CDA. But we'll pitch for studies. You'll get a CDA. You'll send it back. You'll get a feasibility survey, and we will do it together in order for you to get the site selection visit, which is the precursor to getting the study. So, but again, that's in a later module. So, keeping the PI. There's a very good chance. Remember, I said 90% of PIs who do their first study never do a second one. The odds are against you that this PI is going to stick around, right? Either they're going to hate research, you might screw it up, and they rightfully so are going to hate research and hate you, or they just don't think it's enough money, it's not worth their time. And many PIs leave right at the worst possible moment, like right when all the pain points have almost been taken care of, like right when the learning curve, like right at the end of the learning curve where you're about to have a breakthrough. That's usually where it's the worst and it's the most painful for the PI, because the monitors are coming in there and they're complaining and you're not getting paid, and the sponsor's getting upset because you're not collecting the data properly. These are common early startup pain points for a clinical research site. And chances are your first PI is going to experience these pain points and not experience any of the rewards that come after, because Maybe they don't have enough patience for this. Not patients that they treat, but patients as in waiting and being patient. And they just want to quit, right? Or conversely, maybe they see how good the budget is and they say, why do I need Dan to partner with me? I can do this by myself. Okay, so having a contract with the PI is important too, but the reason I didn't even include a contract as a bullet point here is because there's not much you can do. Other than, of course, if they are a business partner with you, you're going to have an operating agreement for your business, and those are enforceable. But non-competes are not really enforceable in many states, and even then, lawsuits are expensive. And so, I mean, it's almost not even worth it to enforce those things with your PIs. If they want to go start their own research clinics, so be it. Your company is the payee for the study. So the study that you got and that you did all the work on, that PI is not going to get paid for it. Okay, that's still going to go to you. But any future studies, they're going to be the payee on if they choose to leave you. Okay, and there's not much you can do. Again, you can sue. What I use is just a simple independent contractor contract that is specific for the state that I'm in. So we will have a sample of this for the graduates of the Site Owner Academy. But again, every state's slightly different. So you may want to take this sample and give it to your attorney and have them make it applicable for your state. And maybe non-compete laws are more favorable to you in other states. But I know in California they're not. Again, outside of a business partnership, because then they have a fiduciary duty to their business partners. But if it's just the independent contractor, if they don't want to work with you anymore, that's it. And then they can go do this on their own. So, very good chance your PI will leave or quit, which makes it all the more important for you to continue to get more studies, or sorry, not more studies, more investigators, more physicians. Never stop recruiting. When things are going good with your physician and you, when relationships are good at the beginning, talk to them about referring their colleagues to you, and then start getting their colleagues involved as sub-investigators, okay, and eventually as principal investigators. So you always have a contingency, you always have a backup plan. Another issue with PIs and their unhappiness is slow payments from sponsors. So, especially at the beginning, not only are there a lot of pain points, but sponsors are notoriously slow at paying, reimbursing you for the work that's been done. Typically, it's 30 to 90 days from when the work's been done to when they're going to pay you. But always, 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 when a study first starts out, it's even longer. So it takes even longer for you to get the payments, and that just adds to the PI's frustrations. Okay, you continue to maintain strong operations, keep the monitors happy, keep the sponsors happy, answer the queries, do the things you said you were going to do and that you're going to learn how to do here. Okay, be transparent about the budget. Show them include them on the email correspondence with the payment analyst. Okay, constantly remind them to refer patients, and never stop searching for new PIs and specialists to add as sub-Is and eventually new PIs. And start and do this when the relationship is good with the PI and the PI is happy. All right, get their colleagues involved. And here's additional resources, YouTube videos and whatnot. Again, in intralinks in the workspace. We're going to have other supporting documentation. So thank you for listening, and let me know if you have questions. Take care.